Welcome again to my channel, everyone. This is Trev from Trevessence, and today we are going to continue the reading of Tears of Rage by John Walsh. I hope you all enjoyed the previous readings as much as I enjoyed bringing them to you. If you are new here, a very special welcome to you. If you have not yet hit that subscribe button, now is a great time to do so. And don't forget to turn on your notification bell so that whenever I upload a video, you'll be first to get notified. And to all my returning travelers, I want to say thank you for your continued support. Now let's get on with Chapter 10, Politics. When we got back home to Hollywood, 20,000 letters were waiting for us, prayers and condolences, mass cards and notices that trees in Adam's name had been planted in Israel. We stored them in boxes and garbage bags in the garage and eventually rented a mini storage space. At first, while Adam was still missing, the letters hadn't asked for anything. But now there were others, the ones that said things like, "I am a parent of a murdered child," or 10 years ago my ex-husband took our kids to Guatemala and I haven't seen them since," or "My child's been missing since last April and I could never get the police to do anything." And then there were the envelopes, more by the day, that said, "I can relate to what happened to you because this is what happened to me. I don't know what to do to help, but here is some money. Here is a check. Use it any way you see fit." Then, sometime in the middle of September, right after we got back from Jeff's place, I got a call from the Washington office of Paula Hawkins, the Florida senator who, a month or so earlier, had tried to get the FBI involved in the search for Adam. The call was from a guy named Jay Howell, the chief counsel of the Senate Investigations Subcommittee that Paula chaired, a committee that was beginning to look into the issue of missing kids, runaways, strange abductions, and parental kidnappings. Jay said that he wanted to talk to me about a piece of legislation that we had first heard about back when Adam was missing. It was called the Missing Children Act. As Jay explained it, about 5 months before, Paul Simon, a Democratic congressman from Illinois who was interested in children's issues and was trying to help Julie Patz, wrote a guest editorial in the Washington Star saying how it was outrageous that the FBI would look for stolen automobiles but not for missing children. Almost immediately, the FBI fired back a response. There was no need for any national legislation on the issue, it said. That's when Paul Simon introduced a bill in the House that would require the government to keep a file on missing children and the unidentified dead. A week later, Paula Hawkins introduced a similar version of the bill in the Senate. Together, the two versions were known as the Missing Children Act, and in Washington, they hadn't even made it to first base. They were dying on the vine. Still, they were the only legislative initiatives going. Nothing else was even on the table. Jay had lined up Julie Patz and Camille Bell, the mother of one of the 29 young black boys who had been found murdered in Atlanta, to testify on the Hill for a hearing on the bill. He asked Reve and me to testify as well. I knew nothing about Washington. I had never been involved in the political process except to vote, and I knew nothing about how legislation is enacted, but I knew what we were up against. It seemed to me that most legislation and lobbying on the Hill dealt with big business and powerful interest groups that had money behind them, but no pressing economic incentives were attached to children's issues. Children can't vote. Still, Jay's gut feeling was that, in spite of all that, if we work at it, we could get this bill passed, and I agreed with him. So Reve and I said yes. The first week of October, we flew up to Washington and got into a taxi for a little tour around town. The driver was showing us the sights, the White House, the Washington Monument, saying things like, "This is the National Rifle Association, and this is the ASPCA building, And this is the Organization of American States. We were interested in doing some research into the issue of missing children, and Reve thought it would be a cakewalk. She was a matter-of-fact person. Could you just take us to where they do all the business on children's issues? He said, well, there really is no such thing as a children's building. There is no building that's specifically for children. We couldn't believe it. There were big, beautiful buildings for guns and dogs and cats, and the Red Cross and the U.S. Mint, and nothing for children. Reve thought to herself, well, somebody'd better get the bricks and mortar then, because we are coming in, and it's going to be a skyscraper. On the morning of October 6, 1981, 8 weeks from Adam's death, Reve and I appeared for a hearing before the Senate Subcommittee on Investigations and General Oversight of the Committee on Labor and Human Resources of the 97th Congress to explore the cause and effect of missing children, focusing on home environment, local law enforcement agencies, and citizen action groups. Ted Kennedy was there, Paula Hawkins, and also a horde of press, which we were really grateful for, at least until they all suddenly went running out of the room. We had no idea what all the commotion was about until somebody finally told us, which was when we realized we probably wouldn't be getting so much coverage after all. Anwar Sadat, the president of Egypt, had been assassinated. The hearing went on as scheduled, and at the start of it, Julie Patz told the committee how, on the morning of May 25, 1979, she had taken her 6-year-old son Ethan out to the sidewalk in front of her house in New York City on what would have been the first morning that he ever walked the block and a half to the school bus by himself. She could see the bus, and lots of other children and parents were around. She watched Ethan walk for half a block, then turned around and went inside. That was the last time she ever saw her son. At the time, of course, no one knew that no trace of Ethan would ever be found. One of the news photographers had asked Julie's husband, Stan, to cry for a picture, because that way, when they find the body, I won't have to come back. Camille Bell testified that on October 21st, 1979, an elderly neighbor asked her 9-year-old son Yusuf to go to the store because he was the only kid in the neighborhood who would go for her without asking to be paid. Yusuf left for the store at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and never came back. A few weeks later, his body was found in an abandoned school. We did not have the influence, the money, the power, the things that are necessary to get a story told, Mrs. Bell said. Finally, when he was found, the committee did rally. That was a little late. Yosef had been strangled, and things went on. And things go on now. When it was our turn to speak, Reve and I placed a picture of Adam in front of us on the witness table. I told the committee about Adam, about how much his life had meant to us, and about how hard it was to lose him. We told the committee firsthand that we had learned how little help there is for parents in our situation. I testified about how, since Adam's death, we had contracted nearly 20 small missing children agencies throughout the country, and that there were estimations of over 150,000 missing children each year, 100,000 runaways and victims of parental abduction, and perhaps as many as 50,000 strange abductions. I told them that as a result of our 1 7-minute appearance on Good Morning America, 3 of the missing children whose pictures were showed have been found. Apparently, people believe that they see on what they see on television, I said, that when a small child is missing, the FBI comes in immediately with an individual similar to Robert Stack in the role of Elliot Ness, and that a SWAT team swoops down on the villains and the child is found. The grim reality is that of what happened to Adam. In most cases, the individuals get no support or help whatsoever and return to their homes emotionally and financially devastated. The next day, under a picture of Julie Potts wiping away her tears, the New York Times ran an article about the hearing. It is certainly evident the priorities of this great country are in some disorder. My quote read, "When a country that can launch a space shuttle that can return to the Earth and take off again, a country that can allocate millions of dollars to save a small fish, the snail darter in the Tennessee Valley River, threatened with extinction, does not have a centralized reporting system or a nationwide search system for missing children. We had no idea where we were heading, not a clue. The house was ready to go into foreclosure. We had gone through our life savings, all the time, something like $13,000. We still had all our bills to pay, and I was trying to hang on to my marketing job, with not much more than adrenaline and drive. But Reve kept saying, 'John, what are we going to do with all of this knowledge that we have about the terrible state of things that no one seems to know about?' We were angry for a lot of reasons, but mostly because when we had most needed help, any kind of help, nothing had been there for us. It didn't exist. But we also had enough faith in human nature to think that if people knew about the problem, they'd do something to stop it. It's just that they have no idea. We told ourselves. It's just that they don't know. We now had tens of thousands of letters offering help and a few $1,000s in contributions. It began to dawn on us that maybe we weren't so alone after all. So we decided to take things to the next level. We decided to get organized. We didn't know the first thing about starting a nonprofit organization. We barely knew what one was. But that didn't stop Reve. In a statement to the local papers, she announced that she was going to open an office to work full-time on the issue of missing children. "Now I have a cause," she said. "It's like something that's been determined." Its name was Adam Walsh Outreach Center for Missing Children. We had to move out of our Hollywood home and out of the police station, so we ran ads in the local paper asking for available office space. The mayor of Pembroke Pines, right next to Hollywood, called us and said that he would donate a little police station in his town that wasn't being used. It was pretty grim. One big room with a partition in it and 3 spaces with bars that had been used as holding cells. Reve moved file cabinets into the cells and used them as storage space. Her office had a door and a 2-way mirror that looked out into the main room. She figured that in the old days, it must have been an interrogation room. People donated a lot of things: office furniture and couches, typewriters and office supplies. The first volunteers were many of the same people who had been searching for Adam. Joe and Jane and Graham volunteered too, and pretty soon even more people started showing up to help. John Monahan told a reporter from the Sun-Tatler that we could still use stationery and some business equipment, and that he had an old IBM typewriter which would do fine if it were repaired. At the very beginning, the center had 3 goals: doing whatever we could to help Paula Hawkins get a Missing Children's Act passed, helping police agencies to recover abducted or missing children, and offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Adam's killer. One day while Reve was sitting getting things set up, a woman came into the office and seemed really upset. She asked if she could talk to Adam Walsh's mother. So Reve told the woman to come into her office and sit down. The woman told Reve that she needed someone to help her find her missing baby. The woman and her husband had been camping down in the Keys along with a friend, a guy who was staying with them in their camper. One night, the guy had started doing drugs. Then everyone went to bed. The next morning, when the woman and her husband woke up, both the guy and the baby were gone. Later on, the guy came back, but he seemed strange and wouldn't tell them anything. The woman was scared and she did go to the police, but they didn't seem particularly alarmed. So she had come to the center. That was when it hit Reve. What could she do? She wasn't a professional. She wasn't a social worker with a big case file or anything. She had only started doing this work the week before. The little boy's name was Thomas Perry, but everyone called him Boo. He was 2.5 years old, and as it turned out, Reve wouldn't have had time to do much of anything to help find him anyway, because pretty soon the cops did. Little Boo Perry's body was found in Key West Swamp. This guy, who was supposed to be the couple's friend, had taken the baby out and drowned him. We had some money from donations to get the center going, but even before we left to testify in Washington, we knew that it would take a lot more to keep it running and really get it established. So we had scheduled our first fundraiser, the Adam Walsh Memorial Benefit, to be held in the parking lot of the Hollywood Mall on October 17th and 18th, right after we got back from Washington, D.C., and at the start of what President Reagan had declared as National Missing Children Week. One of the people helping Reve was Ada Wolf. She had been working the phones, going door to door, publicizing the benefit to reporters, and before long, she told us that she had collected $21,000 and lots of raffle prizes for the benefit. Then, on the morning of the benefit, Reve got a call from Ada Wolf. She was in hysterics. Reve asked her what was wrong, and she finally broke down and told her. Ada Wolf had not actually collected any money after all, and there were no raffle prizes. She had just felt so sorry for us and wanted to help us so much that she had made the whole thing up. All along, everything that she had told us about getting the benefit together was a lie. Reve hung up the phone and didn't even slow down. "Oh, okay, everybody, we have got to get this thing together in a hurry. Let's get going. We have got to get some prizes." It was less than an hour before the benefit was supposed to start, but Les and Jeff ran out and with their own money bought bicycles and kids' watches and whatever else they could find. That's how things were in those days. There was no time to catch your breath. That same weekend, a TV crew from NBC's Real People came down to film us. Then we went back for a second interview on Good Morning America to push for the missing children bill. And we all went to Chicago to be on the Donahoe show. Jesse Jackson was supposed to go on ahead of us because he was the most important guest, but he told me to go on first instead. "You have got a story to tell, John," he said, "so go get it out there and tell it." In the meantime, Jay was prepping me for a parallel hearing scheduled for November 18th before a subcommittee in the House of Representatives. Jay told me, "Paul Simon is sponsoring the missing children bill in the House, and he's under the subcommittee. So he's going to be a very sympathetic ear. But Don Edwards is the committee chairman, and he's got a lot of power. He's a former FBI agent, and he's sliding with the Bureau on this one, against us. He thinks this legislation would interfere with local police jurisdictions and make more paperwork for the FBI. So he's going to try to keep the bill from ever getting to the floor of the House for a vote. What you've got to understand is that other members of the committee are going to bow to his wishes. They are going to buckle under him and vote against us too." Jay kept it up. He was prepping me in cars, on elevators, in offices, everywhere. I'd say, "Tell me this. What about that?" And he would. We were like the coach and the boxer getting ready for a fight. Jay was my source, giving me all the background. He knew all the staffers on both sides, knew who was for the bill and who was against it. He did his homework. He knew the scuttlebutt. "John, take a look at this, but stay away from that. Focus on this. Don't pay any attention to that." Jay Howell had worked on the Hill with legislators and had a lot of respect, even reverence for the process. I didn't. To me, none of it was particularly impressive. I wasn't arrogant about it, but I had come from the business world. I was used to having a staff, running meetings, being responsible for budgets, making presentations, talking to bankers and CEOs about financing and development. Going to Washington wasn't a big, intimidating step for me. The only reason I was going in the first place was to get some things done. I had no time for pleasantries, for all of the bullshit that's part of the political world. True, the buildings were beautiful and the Capitol was impressive. But that's not where the congressmen's offices were. They were in buildings across the street that looked pretty much like any other big white marble building in Washington. When someone refers to a person who is testifying before Congress, most people picture it happening in the House or Senate chambers, those big rooms that you sometimes see on TV. But that isn't the way it really happens. You actually give your testimony in much smaller hearing rooms that are in buildings across the street from the Capitol, such as the Russell or Dirksen Senate office buildings. Even Paula Hawkins' office looked pretty much like any other office. There was a big official seal of the great state of Florida, but otherwise it was a room with desks and chairs and cabinets in it. Paula Hawkins was my senator, but she was also a good human being and a caring grandmother. That's the way she treated people, and that's what impressed me. Paul Simon over in the House was the same way, a bright, gentle, humble man. He and Paula were the kinds of people that I had enormous respect for. The House hearings opened on the morning of November 18th. Revy and I were already up there with our name tags on, waiting to be called to testify. Don Edwards was going through all the usual stuff about how today this august body is holding hearings, and I would like to recognize my distinguished colleagues. And is there anyone who would like to enter a statement for the record? Two people who did were two Democrats, Harold Washington from Illinois and Pat Schroeder from Colorado. Both of them said that they wanted to have their prepared statements entered into the record. And then they stood up and walked out of the room. I couldn't believe it. I had come all the way from Florida to Washington, paid for my own flight and hotel room, and now these elected officials could not even be bothered to give us, the parents of a murdered child, the dignity of 5 minutes of their time to hear what we had to say. Reve was shaking. She was practically in tears. I leaned back to Jay Howard and said, "Jay, can they do this? Do they have the right to just get up and walk out like that?" Jay said, "Of course they do, John. They do it all the time. It's perfectly routine. They have other things to do, other hearings, other votes. They can stay in this hearing room the whole time. They enter their statements for the record, and then they excuse themselves. You have to stick with protocol." My response was, "The hell with protocol. I have been invited to take time off my work to come at my own expense to Washington. And no matter what anybody said, it looked to me as if these people were making a statement by leaving. In effect, saying that they couldn't be bothered to sit there and listen to witnesses who were testifying for a bill that they had no intention of supporting. I don't know if they were busy. I don't know if they had other things to do. All I know was that I thought they were being extremely insensitive to the parents of a murdered child. So when it came my turn to testify and I was introduced, I made a point of saying, "Chairman Edwards, I want to make sure that it's entered into the record that I am specifically addressing the absent Harold Washington and Pat Schroeder, who have left the hearing room." That set the tone right off the bat. Adversarial. No one had ever had the balls to address the committee that way. That afternoon, I decided to pay a visit to Harold Washington. Jane knew a sympathetic staffer who was able to get us a fast appointment, and Jay explained to me that Washington was important because he was going to be a swing vote on the committee. We waited and waited in the receptionist area and were finally ushered in to see him. Now that we were inside, I didn't waste any time. I got right to it. Congressman Washington, how could you ever consider voting against this bill? As a black congressman, you must know that there were 17 murders of black children committed in Atlanta before the police even called the FBI to start investigating. It was a travesty down there, and the reason the investigation was such a mess is because everyone just assumed that it was the Ku Klux Klan who was killing the kids. You know, sir, you should have stayed in that hearing room to listen to Camille Bell today. You should have paid attention to what was going on. I wish she could have come here herself, right into your office, to tell you these things herself. The whole time, Washington's staff guy was sitting there thinking, good Lord, this guy is giving the congressman holy hell.